Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblyman Bob Oaks. Bob Oaks represents the counties of Cayuga, Wayne, and Oswego, and we want to thank you folks all throughout the 130th Assembly District for joining us today. Assemblyman Oaks, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Mike.
This 2016 session is almost over already. There's not much left to go. Is there much left to do?
Well, there's always things to do. There's always the feeling by some, too, is let's finish up and leave, because sometimes when the legislature's in session, we might get a lot of things happen that you don't want to have as state law. And so there's pressure.
We're safer when you're out of town, is what you're saying.
That's been said.
So what kind of issues might there be on the left to do, on people's to-do lists, or and maybe issues that, as you noted, some people wish just wouldn't be coming up at all?
Well, certainly if you talk to Speaker Hasty in the Assembly and what his to-do list is and what my to-do list is, they're probably quite a bit different. And so that is one of my concerns, is to the things that I think are important to me and important to the people of the 130th Assembly District and across upstate New York. Are those going to rise to the top of the list here before we end this session? So things that affect us locally, the security and safety of people. We've had a proposal for Brittany's Law, which would have a greater understanding and for individuals to know if people have a violent past and if you might be directly involved with those individuals, to be able to know about that. We have the whole issue of upstate New York and our economy continuing to lag behind both the downstate economy and the national economy. And so how can we do more to improve that? Certainly mandate relief for our local communities and whatever. It wasn't a part of the budget, and so can we do some things for our communities and school districts? And then I think certainly for a lot of us, if we leave this legislative session without doing something about the ethics issue, it would be a travesty. We've seen between last year and then through this year, arrests, convictions of top legislative leaders, continuing investigations of people within the government. We need to have some changes, strengthening laws within New York State to impact the very people who are running our state and overseeing where New York goes in the future.
So that's a long list. There's a lot of things that could be coming up here in these final few weeks. I took notes. I'm going to come back and ask you about some of these things. Let's start with the last one that you mentioned just now, and that is the idea of ethics and the fact that there are ongoing investigations for some people in this state. It's not as if the investigators from New York City, the federal investigators, seem to be done right now. One of the things they're looking into is this Buffalo Billions project for upstate New York. In fact, a lot of the governor's ideas on how to deal with the upstate economy seem to be coming under a lot of scrutiny these days.
Well, you had the federal prosecutor, Preet Bharara, located in New York City, looking at the legislative leaders and how they operated, and he found problems with the way they carried out their business, both for their personal benefit, their family's benefit, and whatever. And so now he's got subpoenas for getting information, talking to individuals within the executive branch or people connected to the executive branch of this state. And, Mike, Governor Cuomo came into office, tough economy. He made a lot of tough decisions related to the state budget. Upstate New York has not done well. We just, talked a little bit about that. So he came up with a plan which I have been fairly supportive of, concept of saying, okay, let's break the state down in regions. We don't have the same economy in Buffalo that we have in Syracuse. We don't have the same economy in Rochester that we have in New York City. Let's look regionally at what our strengths are and how we might utilize the educational institutions, if we have clusters of a certain type of business or economy, a lot of companies together, can we build on that and have other companies around that? So things like photonics in Rochester, things like food service, but food growing, processing. That whole market is big in the Finger Lakes region. Can we build on that, make it even stronger than what it is? And so each region has some of those different things. And so from that standpoint, he's brought people together, people from the counties, people from the cities, regionally, looking at urban economy, economies regionally. That had the opportunity for us to really make some significant progress. And in fact, there have been proposals that I think make a lot of sense. At the same time, as these proposals were looking to get funded, we brought a lot of people locally together to recommend things, to suggest things, but then everything was sent to Albany, and a lot of people in the legislature, in the Senate, in the Assembly, and others in the community were saying, well, how's that decision going to get made out there? Well, it's going to be in the departments, it's going to be... So the decision-making process, the proposal process was regionalized. Smart, I think, opportunity for doing a great job. But the decision-making all centralized. And lo and behold, out of that centralized decision-making, not transparent, all of a sudden we end up, people within the Cuomo administration are being investigated for maybe directing contracts, right, or maybe getting paid by somebody who was trying to seek those contracts. And so now you get, the decision-making was being done by people who could be influenced and were influenced, it appears. And the investigations are actually going to go there, but it kind of ends up saying you created something that could have been really good, but then you centralized it, and now you put yourself in the position where probably your people who've worked under you, and maybe you yourself, are getting the target of an investigation because of this. It's one of those questions that, why aren't we more open?
Right.
It works better when you do it the right way.
The lack of transparency that you noted is really the key to that entire problem area of the process that you just described. And it's true when it comes to the budget negotiations each and every year.
Absolutely.
Why it's got to be in such secret and not out there with more people involved. And frankly, it's that kind of lack of transparency that seems to have led to the problems of those two legislative leaders that just found themselves arrested, convicted, and sentenced recently here at the state capitol, that they were able to do things with funding and all without anybody knowing about it.
Absolutely. We talked about it a few shows earlier. We had all those problems. We come up with a new budget opportunity. Okay, look, let's do it differently. Here's what we're going to do to change things. Boom, boom, boom. No. We make it even, the only changes became to make it even more secretive, and the process more brought in, and, it's begging for problems again.
And one of the disheartening things about that is, if you remember when Governor Cuomo was first running for office, he was going to come to Albany and change everything and make it an open place and do it. And it just doesn't seem like that's happened. And he's not running for re-election this year or anything like that, but it's just been a little disappointing to see that things haven't really gone in the direction, he was going to ride into town on the white horse and clean things up,
Absolutely. And so we got to change some of the rules of the way things happen, starting out with that. The pension forfeiture. It's an issue where people back in my district, they look at me like, what?
Right.
A person can do all these things, break the law, try to use their position to benefit themselves, but they can still sit in jail and collect a pension, a significant pension for doing that. It's not right. And we need to move forward on that legislation and finally get that passed. There was an agreement over a year ago on doing that, and then all of a sudden the Assembly majority backed off on that. We need to get that done.
And that seems to be one of the most popular items on everyone's to-do list, that's what needs to get done this year. But it didn't get done last year. Nothing's gotten done yet this year, even though we've seen the sentencing of 2 former leaders. It's kind of embarrassing, I think, that this legislature really has come up with nothing to try to police itself a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Some of the other issues that you talked about, we're already down to our last few minutes here, the safety of the communities. You mentioned Brittany's Law. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure.
That creates a registry?
Yes, it does. And you know, it's a lot of the laws have been named for someone. Brittany Pasqualana was lived in Geneva, so in the Finger Lakes region in our area, with her mom, and her mom Helen, and her mom was dating a guy who she knew had been in prison, and she checked on his record. It was for assault, and he told her about how he had been in a bar, and somebody was harassing a woman, and he kind of stepped in to help her and ended up hurting the individual. And it was a bit heroic, and whatever they went on. What it really ended up happening was he had thrown his own child against the wall and hurt them very bad, and had a violent past. And in this case, he was in a fight with Helen, Brittany's mom. Brittany, a 12-year-old, tried to step in between them. He ended up killing both of them. And the sense is that we don't know, or people can't get that type of information. And if Helen had better information, there's a good chance she wouldn't have invited that person into her house and whatever. And so we'd just like to see that where it's greater exposure of information so that people have it and they can make decisions to help keep themselves safe.
All right, and that's something that's on a potential agenda. You also mentioned mandate relief. That's something that I've heard talked about for decades here at the state capitol.
And and Governor Cuomo has gone around the edges a little bit, a little change to the pensions, a little takeover of Medicaid for the county government. So those were important, but the big pieces or things to make it constant. This year we're doing more. This year we're doing more. Right. We're driving things down, and a lot of it is costs related to employees, very honestly. And although it's also paperwork and it's also other things. But if the mindset was, what are we doing now? And if we're doing something, is this causing more work that we're just dumping on people that's going to cost localities and school districts more? That should be the mindset, and very honestly, it's not in New York.
So, you put together a pretty good list there at the beginning of the program, after all.
We do, and the other thing on the economy, that we have a Small Business Act. If the legislature would just look at some of the proposals that we have, and the governor put together a commission, I hope they're looking at. They're supposed to report in another week or so on things to help the upstate economy. I hope they're looking at our Small Business Improvement Act that we've put together in the minority.
A lot of the same ideas in terms of what I've heard from small business over the years, the regulation and the red tape,
sure.
Besides the high taxes in the state, but just trying to unencumber them from all the rules and regulations that they need to follow just to try to stay in business.
Absolutely. Or give some encouragement to people to start their own businesses, to do as much as we can to try to lift those who are in business and those who would be.
Just a couple of weeks to go to this legislative session. We'll find out in our next show maybe how much of this was going to get done. Bob Oaks, thanks for joining us today. We want to thank you folks, too, for stopping by and spending your time with us. We'll hope to see you soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.